Hello, everyone. Today we are putting a bizarre, yet human side of international politics under the microscope. Major think tanks like the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, estimate that total casualties in the Russia-Ukraine war have topped 2 million since February 2022. War crimes and massacres that should be unthinkable in the 21st century are happening right now. Yet the rest of the world goes about its days peacefully, smiling and laughing. In another part of the world, South Korea is suffering from unimaginable human rights abuses, but the global media ignores it. Even the United States is questioning the legitimacy of the current radical left-wing regime, giving it a diplomatic cold shoulder due to issues with election transparency. At home, this leader interferes in the citizens' everyday lives at every turn. The regime orders people not to drink certain coffee, tells companies where to invest, and even micromanages the production of low-cost pads. If the media covers election suspicions, he pressures them through ad cuts. He hits foreign companies with punitive damages and investigates critics, even outside the country. He slams desks, barks at his staff, and uses the law as a weapon to oppress the public with raw power. It goes further. He jails religious figures and has unarmed citizens handcuffed for minor actions. He demands maximum sentences for political enemies, but shows total leniency to his supporters. Inside his own walls, his ego tricks him into believing he is the center of the world. But when the stage broadens to the international arena, everything changes. In massive international halls filled with conflicting interests and cold evaluations, his expression hardens. No one gives him special treatment, and no one automatically respects his authority. There he is forced to face the massive gap between the image he created and who he actually is. This isn't just about diplomacy. Psychologically, it's about power and ego. Politically, it's about trust and reputation. In Eastern philosophy, it's the old clash between illusion and reality. Coercive control, power built on dependency. One of the most extensively studied concepts in modern criminal psychology is coercive control. The term originally emerged from research on domestic violence, coercive relationships, authoritarian family systems, and organized criminal groups. It describes a pattern in which an individual maintains dominance, not primarily through physical violence, but through continuous control over another person's environment, choices, information, and emotional security. Fear becomes routine. Dependence becomes normal. Resistance gradually disappears. The controlling individual does not need to issue threats every day. The system itself becomes the threat. People obey because they have learned that disagreement carries consequences. Although developed to explain interpersonal abuse, this concept can also serve as a metaphor for understanding certain forms of political leadership. In highly centralized political systems, authority often extends far beyond constitutional power. Appointments determine careers. Investigative agencies influence personal security. Access to media shapes public perception. Political loyalty becomes closely tied to professional survival. Within such an environment, the leader's confidence is continually reinforced. Everyone appears to agree. Everyone appears to applaud. Everyone appears to admire. But psychology asks an uncomfortable question. Do they truly admire the leader, or do they merely fear the consequences of disagreement? These two forms of obedience may look identical from the outside, yet they are psychologically worlds apart. Respect can survive the absence of authority. Fear cannot. The tiger inside the cage. Imagine a tiger ruling an enclosed territory. Every creature within that enclosure recognizes its strength. Its roar commands immediate attention. Its presence alone determines the behavior of others. Inside the enclosure, the tiger appears invincible. Now imagine removing the walls. Outside the enclosure, other powerful animals exist. No one is obligated to retreat. No one automatically acknowledges dominance. The tiger has not physically changed, yet its psychological environment has changed completely. Much the same may occur when political leaders leave the institutional structures that reinforce their authority. Domestic institutions often provide predictable hierarchies. International diplomacy does not. Foreign presidents are not employees. Prime ministers are not cabinet ministers. International organizations cannot be directed through domestic authority. The mechanisms that previously guaranteed obedience simply no longer exist. What remains is something much more fundamental: the individual personality. When authority ends, personality begins. Psychologists have long distinguished between external authority and internal security. External authority comes from position. Internal security comes from character. The two are not always connected. Some leaders possess remarkable emotional stability regardless of office. Others unconsciously rely upon their office to regulate their own sense of worth. When institutional power is temporarily removed during international summits, negotiations, or meetings among equals the protective shell surrounding identity may suddenly crack. The individual is no longer buffered by titles, protocol, or subordinates. Instead, they encounter social reality directly. This transition can be psychologically unsettling. For individuals whose self-esteem depends heavily upon continuous admiration, even ordinary diplomatic distance may feel like personal rejection. Silence becomes humiliation. Neutrality becomes hostility. Professional caution becomes emotional abandonment. The external world has not necessarily changed. The internal interpretation has. The return of the frightened child. Modern developmental psychology suggests that early emotional patterns often remain active throughout adulthood. Success may hide them. Power may suppress them. Fame may distract from them. But under sufficient psychological stress, deeply rooted emotional structures often reappear. Some clinicians describe this as regression, the temporary return to earlier emotional coping mechanisms. When current challenges overwhelm psychological resources, an individual who appears decisive in familiar circumstances may suddenly become anxious, defensive, or withdrawn when confronted with unfamiliar forms of evaluation. Why? Because the situation unconsciously activates much older emotional experiences. Acceptance, rejection, recognition, exclusion. The human brain evolved to treat social exclusion as a serious threat. For most of human history, being abandoned by one's community dramatically reduced the chances of survival. Although modern diplomatic events pose no physical danger, the brain may still react as though social isolation threatens existence itself. The emotional pain is real, even when the objective circumstances remain entirely peaceful. The illusion of invulnerability. Power creates another psychological phenomenon. It often reduces honest feedback. As authority increases, fewer people are willing to challenge assumptions. Advisors become cautious. Subordinates become agreeable. Information gradually becomes filtered. Leaders begin hearing what others believe they wish to hear. This creates what organizational psychologists frequently call an echo chamber. Inside an echo chamber, confidence grows rapidly. Reality, however, becomes increasingly distant. Errors remain uncorrected. Warnings go unheard. Contradictory evidence disappears. Eventually, confidence becomes disconnected from competence. This is one of the great paradoxes of leadership. The stronger the appearance of unquestioned authority, the greater the danger that genuine self-knowledge will decline. Power protects leaders from criticism. Unfortunately, it also protects them from truth. International reality has no echo chamber. The international system functions differently. Other governments have their own interests, their own voters, their own intelligence services, their own strategic calculations. They are not emotionally invested in preserving another leader's self-image. Consequently, international diplomacy often becomes an unexpected mirror. Unlike domestic political systems, it reflects reality with far less distortion. No advisor can arrange spontaneous conversations. No communications team can manufacture authentic respect. No public relations strategy can permanently replace credibility. Influence must be earned repeatedly. Reputation must be maintained continuously. Trust cannot be legislated. This explains why some leaders appear surprisingly uncomfortable in multilateral settings. For perhaps the first time in years, they encounter an environment where institutional power cannot substitute for personal credibility. Psychological exposure. From a criminological perspective, this moment resembles the removal of protective armor. Individuals accustomed to controlling every variable suddenly confront circumstances beyond their influence. Their familiar behavioral strategies become ineffective. Control no longer guarantees outcomes. Authority no longer commands automatic obedience. Status no longer ensures admiration. What remains is psychological exposure. The emotional experience can be deeply unsettling. Observers sometimes interpret visible discomfort as weakness, yet psychology suggests something more nuanced. The individual may not simply be experiencing embarrassment. They may be confronting a profound identity crisis. For years, their public role and private self have gradually merged. Now, external reality begins separating them once again. The process is painful because it challenges the very foundation upon which their identity has been constructed. A lesson beyond politics. Although we have discussed political leadership throughout this lecture, the underlying lesson extends far beyond government, businesses, universities, military organizations, religious institutions, even families. Every human community faces the same temptation. Whenever authority replaces humility, whenever obedience replaces honest dialogue, whenever praise replaces truth, psychological contamination begins. People gradually lose the ability to distinguish genuine respect from reluctant compliance. The danger is not limited to presidents or prime ministers. It exists wherever power becomes insulated from reality. That is why criminal psychology ultimately teaches a lesson about every human being. Control can produce obedience. It cannot produce authentic trust. Fear can create silence. It cannot create genuine respect. Authority can command behavior. Only character can inspire loyalty.